Hello, Helldivers. After the crushing defeat at Malevelon Creek, it's apparent that some of you missed basic training. I'm here as a highly trained, professional, efficient Helldiver to fix that. To help your tiny ape brain understand, I've simplified it into an easy-to-digest, simple and short tier list that even your TikTok-addled brain can understand. First, some basics. This list is based off of the difficulties 7 and above. I sure hope you're not struggling, because Helldivers 1 goes up to difficulty 15. I hope you're ready, Helldiver, because we have a long war ahead of us. The machine gun is the first support weapon that you'll get, and honestly, even after 100 hours and 100%ing everything in the game currently, it still holds up. It's a heavy, lumbering, variable fire rate monster that tears through light armor. On lower difficulties, or missions where you have someone in the anti-armor role, it's godly. Holding R lets you change the fire rate, but it's heavy, requires you to stop to reload, and takes a long time to follow your cursor. But man does that thing feel good. Originally, I put the machine gun in B, but after more thorough testing, it's just badly outclassed by the other support weapons. It's barely worth considering. These are my best clips, and only after the fact did I notice that I barely got any kills. It's just not effective at all. The machine gun gets demoted to E. The Stalwart is a lighter version of the machine gun. It's easier to aim and doesn't require you to stop to reload. It is, for all intents and purposes, a worse machine gun. It's fun to use, but the most a machine gun will ever be is an extension of your primary weapon's capabilities. It does get an extra mag, and if you want to run it as a primary, go ahead, but you're missing out on the downright necessary utility of other support weapons. Oddly enough, I was going to put this in E, but I've flipped from preferring the regular MG to preferring the Stalwart. Being able to reload on the move is just too essential, and with both machine guns having similar time to kill, the Stalwart is just far more versatile. Both are still outclassed, but if you want to run a machine gun like a primary weapon, the Stalwart should be your choice. Just remember that if you choose either, you need to bring another anti-armor capable stratagem. The Anti-Material Rifle is an anti-armor rifle. Well, it's supposed to be. In reality, it can only ever penetrate light armor and must be fired in first person. It does have variable zoom, which is cool, but it's slow, cumbersome, and has low DPS and utility. If you're aiming for weak spots, you're better off getting a marksman rifle and saving the support slot for something with real use. F tier, for fucking useless. The Expendable Anti-Tank is a one-shot launcher designed for, well, tanks. In this role, it's alright. A good example of this is when a Titan took a 500kg bomb and then 3 additional expendables to finish it off.
Later.
The utility of this comes from the fact that the drop pod has 2 launchers each, and the cooldown is insanely short. This means you can run another support weapon as your main, drop an expendables pod when you run into enemy armor, then carry on the mission with your original. It's pretty cumbersome when compared to the other anti-armor options, but it works, and it's fun as hell. You can also use it to shoot down bot dropships if you hit the thrusters, which is pretty easy with the speed of this thing. There is also an alleged way to one-shot a Titan by shooting it in the mouth right before it spits, but I've been unable to achieve this. I give the Expendable Anti-Tank an A for always dispensing freedom. The Recoilless Rifle, on the other hand, is a reusable launcher that comes with a backpack of ammo. It does far less damage than the Expendable, which already doesn't do enough damage. Running solo with this it's not great. The reload is so slow that it makes it very difficult to use in the middle of combat, and you'll need to use every rocket to take down heavies. Plus, it takes up a backpack slot, which is a heinous crime on the hardest difficulties. It does have anti-armor capabilities. With that one loaded shot, you can shoot a charge's leg to expose its weak point, and at that point, it's trivial to deal with. It gets an F. For fucking... But wait! If someone else wears the backpack, everything changes. The reload speed is diced to a fraction of the time. You can rapid fire every rocket faster than you can call in an Eagle Strike. If you double up on rifles, you can go back to back for 12 consecutive rockets. It definitely gets an extra point for the cool factor, but the actual utility of this is questionable. You're now sacrificing 2 support slots and 2 backpacks, the weight of which will be apparent when we get to backpacks. It can also shoot down dropships, though the rocket is slower, but you do get 5 shots. We can bump it up to C, for could be better. The Flamethrower was originally on my shit list. I just expected it to be shit. All of the problems we were having on max difficulty were to do with heavies, so we needed anti-armor. Then, I picked one up off of a fallen comrade, and...
You will never destroy our way of life! Kill them all!
so many clips like this. This thing is incredible.
How'd you like to taste some freedom?
It's a little fussy, but it's a support weapon. Get yourself on a bit of high ground, or find a choke point, and decimate the infectious insects. Just be wary of chargers and titans. It will eventually kill chargers, but not before it knocks you over, and suddenly, your little choke point is a free gateway for your enemies to swarm you. It takes a little to get used to. It's not very effective against automatons, since you'll leave yourself exposed to gunfire when using this. Give it a B for burnt bugs. The autocannon is the anti-material rifle on steroids. It's capable of stripping the armor from charges with its explosive rounds. Okay, scratch that. I really thought highly of this thing, but I think I only used it when we were starting out. Going back and using this thing to kill chargers, it's useless. It has a high explosive effect, but even for killing groups of light enemies, it's just not very good. It's basically a bad, cumbersome grenade launcher, if I'm being honest. Like the recoilless rifle, this one also comes with a backpack, but it's much more reasonable. You can reasonably solo reload with this one, but the loss of a backpack slot is always going to be painful. The co-op reload isn't really much to write home about. Like I said, on lower difficulties, it was one of the first weapons able to reliably kill chargers. By difficulty 7 though, it's near useless. I give it a D for disgraceful to democracy. The grenade launcher is the finest way to dispense freedom and liberty to the Terminid Scourge. It doesn't have traditional anti-armor, but the splash damage can bypass some enemies. Its main use is for rapidly clearing hordes of enemies, and also for destroying hives from a distance. So while it isn't technically anti-armor, it fills the crowd control and objective niches. There isn't too much more to say. I don't run it super often, but someone on our team always does. It's a great tool, just as long as someone else is taking care of armor. For this reason, it's far better against bugs than bots, which I think is the case with most weapons. It gets a B for brother, you have ragdolled me across the map.
I hate gravity!
The laser cannon is pretty trash. There isn't really much to say. It has infinite ammo if you don't overheat it, and one replacement reload if you do. It doesn't penetrate armor, and it doesn't really do much damage. This thing needs some kind of buff. It'd be cool if it could melt armor if you kept the laser on one point. It gets an F for being an absolute failure. The arc thrower is what an energy weapon should be. Not many people like it, but it's actually really good at crowd control, and in some cases, anti-armor. It takes some getting used to. It has infinite ammo, but has to charge for each shot. I can't confirm it, but it feels like waiting for the flash of lightning makes it more likely to chain to other targets. Oh yeah, it chains between targets. Heavy and armored enemies often sit at the front of a horde, and the first 2 shots you put into a charger will net you half a dozen kills to all the weaker enemies behind it. Granted, it takes up to 15 headshots to kill a charger, but you're likely to kill everything behind it in the process. Like the flamethrower. Like the flamethrower? Oh my. Like the flamethrower. If you find a choke or get to high ground, you can just sit and decimate entire bug breaches without breaking a sweat. The range is actually far longer than you'd think it would be. Not far enough to put you out of the effective range of automatons, but for bugs, you can take out an entire patrol before they even form up. Speaking of automatons, it's good and it isn't. Like I say, you have to expose yourself to use it, and against melee bots, it's near useless. But if you position yourself right, this thing ignores armor and will slowly shred through anything you point it at. I will say though, this thing feels horrible to use. Having to charge each shot is a headache, and every time you don't charge enough, you get blue-balled by it not firing. The arc thrower gets a C for could be useful. The spear is, well, it's broken, so it's hard to say. Right now, it doesn't lock on half the time, and you can't fire it without a lock. It comes with a backpack carrying an additional 3 rockets. The real draw of this is that it can one-hit kill tanks, but it's really hit or miss as to whether it will. Sometimes a tank will shrug off 3 hits, sometimes it dies to 1, regardless of where you aim. It's good for finishing off a low health titan at a distance, but one time I shot 3 spears into a titan, just for it to keep coming. If it worked, it would be a great support weapon that you can pull out for a reliable anti-tank, but in its current state, it's just a bad, non-expendable anti-tank. And the final nail in the coffin, it doesn't have a team reload, and ammo packs found at points of interest don't resupply the rockets. I think in a future balance update, it'll move up to a C or even B slot, depending on how much damage it does. I want to see it consistently 1 to 2 shot tanks, and reliably 3 shot a titan at least. It is one of the few weapons that's effective at long range. It can target objective buildings and large enemies at what feels like infinite range, if you can manage to lock the damn thing. So I really do see potential. After all, it is one of the last unlocks. Until then, I'm putting it in E for every now and then.
The missile is not sure where it is.
The railgun is God's gift to the Helldivers. When the automatons attacked and all hope seemed lost, the railgun descended from the heavens and in the trained hands of a holy helldiver proceeded to one-shot every Hulk in existence. Early on, we had a day where the railgun was free, and we immediately realized this is the weapon of choice. It can kill everything. Hold R to change the fire mode to unsafe, charge that bad boy and one-hit most enemies like a true soldier. It's pretty much essential for someone to have it for higher difficulty missions. The only thing that's comparable are the most powerful orbital and eagle strikes. It's currently in a class of its own. In fact, it needs its own tier. Let's call it SEF for Super Earth's finest. As mentioned, it can one-shot Hulks with a good headshot, melt tanks through the front of the armor as long as the shots line up with the vent at the back, which also applies to turrets, one-shot spitters, strip the armor from charger legs with 2 shots, one-shot shield devastators, stun, and even kill titans, if you want to use up to 15 shots. It's unrivaled as a handheld weapon. It completely demolishes heavies, which are your main adversary, and I often find myself using it to kill the tougher enemies, like spitters and warriors, instead of mag dumping with my primary.
Oh, they just...
I hope that rather than nerf the railgun, they bring up the other options to a comparable level. Then, we can have harder difficulties, or more enemies. I really hope we see a horde mode someday, with impossible waves of enemies to see how long you can hold out. An effective and independent team will all run a railgun each, but it's only necessary to run one railgun if you all work together. It is essential on the difficulties suicide and above for someone to run the railgun simply to strip armor from charger's legs. Oh yeah, there is also the break action shotgun, which can be found in missions.
There's unlock behind you, D-Rug.
Okay, let me see if I can one-shot him. Nope. So, the previous section mentioned backpacks a few times. Since they're tied together, they'll stay on the same tier list. Again, the order of the stratagem list is a little fucky, so I'll order it in a way that makes sense. The supply pack is the first backpack you'll get. Again, like the machine gun, it holds up relatively well from low to high difficulty. It depends on your playstyle. Dotted around the map are dozens of ammo packs at points of interest, more than you'll ever need. Paired with the resupply pod you always have, you'll never really want for ammo. The issue arises when you either don't know or don't want to be on the move constantly. If you're the type of player who likes to sit on an objective and fight the endless hordes, you'll be running out of ammo fast. It is also a fun playstyle to constantly throw everything you have at enemies, which coincides nicely with running from point of interest to point of interest, killing all the guards and patrols before they can call in reinforcements. So it's kind of a newbie backpack, and there's no shame in that. I love being a support player, but we haven't needed that backpack in a long time. So I was over 100 hours when I found out that you can self-supply. This changes everything. It opens up a new avenue for your loadouts, and with the self-supply, you can be a lot more spammy with high consumption weapons like the machine guns and grenade launcher. It practically moves the grenade launcher from a B to an A when used in this combination. The cooldown is too long to completely rely on it, but the resupply pod rearms you and the supplies per rearm, so you essentially get 2 rearms for the price of 1. If you really want to min-max it, you could drop the pack and have everyone pick it up when they rearm, but it's really not necessary. The supply pod has like a 3-minute cooldown, which is more than enough. Just be advised that ammo packs on the ground do not stock the pack. You can pretty much call down the resupply pod as soon as it's off cooldown, since most of the time it sits unused. If anyone ever needs ammo, you can just go give them some. With this knowledge, it gives some legitimate competition to the meta. Go out and give it a try. It goes in A for all the options it opens. The jump pack is hot trash, unless you do a little jump. Think about a jetpack and what you want it to do. You'd want to use it to get to high ground or to avoid enemies. Maybe a way to hover by tapping the jump button for a few seconds to open up some new dimension to a fight? The jump pack says no to all of that. Gives you one pretty small and clunky jump. It's probably the worst rendition of a jetpack in games I've ever seen. Half the time it doesn't work.
Jump? Jump? Jesus fucking Christ.
It takes like 30 seconds to recharge, and it has a completely set trajectory.
You can't escape me! I'll chase you to the ends of the earth!
It gets an F. The confusingly named Guard Dog and Guard Dog Rover are drones that hover over and protect you. The Guard Dog is a ballistics gun, and the Rover is laser-based. The ballistics Rover needs to reload and has finite ammo, whereas the laser only needs to recharge and is infinite. The ballistics Rover is supposed to do more damage, but it feels like it only holds like 10 bullets and constantly reloads. Plus, just like the spear, ammo packs on the map don't reload the pack. So the laser is the objective choice here. Although, half the time, I feel like it decides it doesn't want to target anything and watches me get mauled by 10 hunters.
You come to America looking like that, I will fuck the shit out of you.
The Laser Dog gets a D for damn that's a lot of kills, and the Ballistics gets an F for being functionally obsolete. The Shield Generator Pack is the savior of Super Earth. It lives on in legend with the Railgun as objectively the best items in the game. Where do I even start? This is the backpack you want on higher difficulties. It negates many one-shot kills and relegates them to simply breaking the shield. So first of all, you're not taking any physical damage, so you're not wasting stims constantly, and it's essentially a recharging health bar. And secondly, it prevents staggering. As long as the shield is up, damage you take won't stagger you, which is huge for things like Stalkers, Devastators, and Chargers. Chargers especially. You can just walk away as they charge into you, and as long as the shield stays up, so do you. The only downside to the shield pack is that it trivializes every other backpack. For a while, I made a point not to run it, so that I could get experience with all the other backpacks, and while some playstyles like Stealth don't require it, and if you simply get good, you don't technically need it, it just gives too much of a benefit on the harder difficulty missions. It makes such a difference when you're not getting ragdolled around constantly. Like the Railgun and some others, it has a ridiculously long cooldown, so make sure you're picking your equipment back up and saving the cooldowns for when you physically can't retrieve it. The only note I really have is having 2 slots taken up by a Railgun and a Shield Generator really limits how creative you can be with your other stratagems, especially given that you basically have to run a 500kg bomb, and with everyone using this loadout and the Breaker Shotgun, it gets boring really quick. Super Earth's finest, without a doubt. Aren't you forgetting something? No. Now we're on to the non-player carried stratagems, starting with the orbital strikes. These originate from guns on the ship and are defined by their usually infinite use and wide utility. They really benefit from the increased salvo ship module, which we'll get into later. If I don't mention how many uses it has, then it means it's infinite. Just be wary of the stratagem scatter modifier, as these will get you killed. The Orbital Precision Strike is your first offensive stratagem. It's pretty generic and lackluster. Like all the strikes, they can't one-shot a Titan, which is where we'll get most of our comparisons from. The Precision Strike just doesn't stand out in any way. It's good for killing a small cluster, or a hive with a 100-second cooldown. Use it till you get something better. It gets D for how quickly you'll be done with it. The Orbital Gatling Barrage, on the other hand, is a series of high explosive rounds that cover a similar area to the Precision Strike, but due to how long it lasts, it can be used to clear an entire wave of enemies, where the Precision Strike's damage fall-off would not. With a cooldown of 80 seconds, you'll feel like this thing is always ready for you, and with infinite uses, you may as well use it as often as you can. There's no such thing as a wasted HE shell. It gets a B for being one of the best auxiliary stratagems. Similarly, the Orbital Airburst Strike covers a comparable area, but is in a line perpendicular to the direction you throw. It does have a similar amount of damage, even though it's not high explosive, and since it has 3 salvos by default, it can be used as area denial or to cover a bug hole for a decent amount of time. It does, however, have a 120-second cooldown. It gets a C for being the weaker brother of the Gatling Barrage. The Orbital 120 and 380mm Barrage are a peculiar pair. Both of them are too random and inaccurate to get much use out of, although it is satisfying as hell when a shell lands on a group. Originally we would throw these on big bug nests, but it's just ineffective, and with a 240-second cooldown, you could call down 3 Gatling Barrages. The 120mm is at least concise enough to have very limited uses clearing bases and hives, but the 380 can't be thrown far enough to not be at risk of friendly fire without the armor that lets you throw further. Yeah, it's cool, but it's just too ineffective. The 380 gets an F for friendly fire, but the 120 gets E for extremely impractical. The Orbital Walking Barrage is sort of like the 120mm if it went in a rough line ahead of the direction you threw it. Even the preview for this shows how ineffective it is. 90% of the time, you need a precise strike on a specific target, and when you don't, you want a specific area to be blanketed with fire. None of these cover the ground you want. They're just too inaccurate, and with a cooldown of yet again 240 seconds, you're just going to get way more utility out of others. The Walking Barrage goes to E with the 120mm. The Orbital Laser is one of 2 strikes that aim themselves. This one will follow targets until there are none left, or until it runs out. It can cover as wide an area as an enemy leads it, and would appear to be an anti-Titan weapon, but even against charges, this thing struggles. There are 2 things that completely kill it: a 300-second cooldown, and a free use limit. This thing needs an extreme boof. Boof? Straight to hell with this trash. The Orbital Rail Cannon Strike is our other self-aiming strike. It will target the largest enemy near the beacon and strike it with a 100% accurate penetrating round. It has a near instant call-in and aim time, and with infinite uses, it can be used to take out pesky heavies instantly. It doesn't one-shot Titans sadly, but will often leave it vulnerable to an expendable or a second rail strike. Sadly, it has a 210 second cooldown, which is a bit too long for it to have a real utility. If you run multiple on a team or play slowly and stealthily, I highly recommend giving it a try, because it absolutely works, but it is kind of niche. It does reliably one-shot tanks though. Trying it again after unlocking everything, I will say that 210 seconds is short enough of a cooldown between engagements. It only can't keep up if you get stuck into long, drawn-out, never-ending fights. If you use overwhelming firepower to prevent reinforcements, this thing is a super convenient tool for heavies. The rail cannon gets an A for anti-armor. Finally, we have the orbital gas, EMS, and smoke strikes. The gas strike does kill enemies, but it's sort of meh. It's good for dropping on an area where lots of enemies will pass through, but it doesn't last very long. The EMS strike is alright, especially before sending in a destructive strike, and the smoke strike just has better options in the Eagle version. Plus, I found it pretty ineffective for breaking the line of sight for stealth. The EMS and gas strike do have cooldowns of 75 seconds, which is really good for consistent area denial. I just feel like other stratagems have more use. Try them if you have to spend your money. I put them all in E for if you're feeling extra. Alright, this is where the magic is. I immediately spec'd into the Eagle strikes. I wanted to be the guy calling in airstrikes constantly. And a fair bit of warning, you will cause a lot of friendly fire while you're getting the hang of the ranges. The Eagle's deal is that it's a plane on standby, ready to call in near instant strikes. It can carry multiple different strikes with multiple uses, and all on an extremely short cooldown of only 8 seconds. The catch is that it has to rearm, but the rearm time is only like 200 seconds? I can't remember what the unupgraded time is. And on top of that, the final hangar upgrade adds an extra strike to each Eagle stratagem you take. This is insane! The amount of strikes you can put down in a short amount of time is immense, especially if you're tactical with your rearms, which you have infinite of. It'll begin to make sense as I go over each individual stratagem, beginning with the Eagle's strafing run. I honestly slept on this for a long time. I rushed the bigger stuff, but I came back to this when I was unlocking and testing everything. It's actually really good. It's quick, has 4 uses unupgraded, which is really handy for getting enemies off your back, or clearing a small area, since you can pretty much call it right on top of you. I would give it a higher rating, but there are better options, even just in the Eagle section. Use it while you're low level. Solid C. The Eagle Airstrike is the strafing run on steroids. It calls in a bombing run perpendicular to the way you throw it. It has 3 uses unupgraded and can be called in relatively close. I usually drop it on myself in a panic, and you have plenty of time to get away, provided you don't get ragdolled. This is my go-to if I have a spare slot or I don't know what else to take. It won't be killing Titans or tanks anytime soon, and to be honest, even chargers will survive almost all the time, but it's great for clearing a small area quickly. It gets an A for always useful. The Eagle Cluster Bomb is sort of like the wimpy version of the Airstrike. It does the same thing, but it just never seems to kill anything. It does get 5 strikes by default, so you can put down a lot of fire, but it just doesn't reliably kill even the lightest of enemies. I'm gonna put it in C. The Eagle Napalm Strike is a weird one. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but fire can be really deadly if used right. I'd say it's like the Airstrike, but more area denial than clearance. You can drop it on a bug breach, for example, or a choke point. It has 3 uses before rearm by default. There are better options, so I'll give it a D. The Eagle Smoke Strike is what I would recommend if you want to use smokes. It blocks line of sight, meaning you can use it to lose enemies, which is probably the most powerful tactic in the game. I just find it doesn't work for bugs, since they're usually too close for smoke to block you for long enough to lose them. Like most strikes, it's perpendicular to the direction thrown and gets 3 strikes. It goes in C because now you see me. The Eagle 110mm rocket pods are phrased like it's an anti-heavy weapon. It says it will hit the largest target near the beacon, but it can't kill most enemies. It just seems completely pointless. Tiny area, tiny damage. E. The Eagle 500kg bomb is the final cornerstone in the triage of Liberty. It completes the set with the railgun and shield pack by giving you a true anti-armor weapon capable of one-shotting everything in the game. By default, you only get 1 of these per rearm, but with the hangar upgrade, you get 2. It's hard to get across just how good this is. The only problem is the damage fall-off. Anything short of a direct hit on the torso or right underneath a Titan will not guarantee a one-hit kill. It takes some getting used to. but the bomb drops parallel to the direction thrown at an angle, which can easily get stuck on mountains. It's also hard to time, despite the quick calling time. You're going to want to throw it right as the Titan begins to spit, stab, or roar, and pray it doesn't move. We're pretty good at predicting its movement,
Oh, the fucking leg lamp.
but it will often just decide it's going to head in the opposite direction for no reason. Outside of its one-shot capabilities, it's not very effective. Because of the fall-off, it rarely kills much. You do get the occasional 15 kills with one, but you're probably more likely to kill something like a charger by having the bomb land on it rather than the explosion. Speaking of which, if it lodges in a Titan's leg, that's a surefire way to have it not be a one-shot. You pretty much need a follow-up weapon, just in case. Naturally, it's up there in the trifecta of Super Earth's finest. You might think that sentries don't have much use outside of defense missions, but you'd be wrong. When used right, i.e. out of the way of enemies, they are deadly for clearing objectives, bug breaches, bot drops, hives, you name it. They also draw enemies, which can allow you to retreat from an endless swarm of enemies with a tactical distraction. They do have one big weakness though: chargers. To a lesser degree, the bots are pretty bad for them, since it's easy for a turret to get overwhelmed, but it's almost always melee enemies that kill them. Chargers are just notorious for walking over and trampling them, and there's little you can do. They all have a cooldown of 180 seconds. The machine gun sentry is the first and easily the worst. It seems to run out of ammo just as fast as the stronger variants do, and do less in the same amount of time. I figured it would have more ammo in exchange for the less damage or something.
Ooh. Stop it.
It goes in E. Damn, it's getting pretty full down here. The Gatling Sentry, on the other hand, will single-handedly decimate a horde if placed right. It runs out of ammo insanely fast, but if you put it behind a swarm, those Terminids will soon be terminate. If you're not careful, like all turrets, it'll get destroyed before it can do much, or get stuck shooting an armored target for 0 damage, limiting its utility. But be smart, and you'll love this little gun. One thing about both the gun turrets is that they will fire while turning, wasting a lot of ammo, so place them where they won't need to turn as much, aka not at close range. It gets a C for the charger about to trample it. The Mortar Sentry is the deadliest of the bunch, to your friends at least. Even now, we constantly friendly fire each other with this thing.
What? What?
But man is it good. It can carry defend missions on its own, so you can go play whatever brain-melting TikToks the kids are watching these days. Given enough time, this thing will even kill tanks and titans. You do have to be strategic with the placement. It can't defend itself.
Oh my god, this is beautiful. Oh my god, this is beautiful.
Place it right, and it'll last half of the cooldown, meaning you could theoretically have a mortar up for half the mission time. Easily an A for absolutely disgusting. The EMS Mortar Sentry is more of a niche one. Ask yourself this: why would you stun enemies instead of just kill them with the regular mortar? Well, one reason is to use it in conjunction with the regular mortar, which will increase the hit chance substantially, but then you're taking up 2 of your 4 slots for a marginal improvement. I will concede that the EMS mortar has its merits on automaton missions. It stuns them almost indefinitely, basically until it runs out of ammo or you kill the automatons. So long as the mortar is safe, it can really ease up those crazy bot engagements. For that reason alone, I'll bump it up to D. The Autocannon Sentry is the king of direct fire sentries. Anything in this thing's line of fire is fair game. It will deal with warriors, devastators, hulks, chargers, and even bot dropships all the same. Place it down in an open vista and watch the carnage unfold.
Oh, I knew that was gonna happen.
It goes in A for being the best sentry. The Rocket Sentry is a sorry follow. It lasts much longer because of its slow rate of fire, but is extremely vulnerable. It's much worse against heavy targets, so unlike the autocannon, a charger will walk over this thing like it's nothing. It's pretty good at taking down dropships, but that's a niche feature. In the grand scheme of things though, it's just outclassed. I would never recommend taking this over the autocannon or mortar sentries, and you rarely have enough slots to take 2 sentries unless you're AFK farming a defense mission. I would put it in C for its own merits, but it's just outclassed. I originally rated it higher, but it goes in E because every other sentry is better than it. And finally, we have emplacements. Similar to sentries, they're deployable defensive structures. They're sort of miscellaneous. The anti-personnel and incendiary mines throw their respective mines in a surprisingly large radius around the drop pod. They persist for the entire mission, so you can have quite a few of these things going. Just be warned, it's very easy to step on them. You can sort of use them like an Eagle Strike or Napalm that simply lasts much longer, since it takes longer for all the mines to be activated. Not only that, the incendiary mines are the coolest effect in the game.
That is cool. Even if they're shit, that's really cool.
I find myself rarely using them, because you always desperately need anti-armor. They're not the worst, but they're a D. The heavy machine gun emplacement is the surprising underdog of the bunch. This thing is incredible. Place it in a spot with wide ranges and you will shred everything. This thing kills everything short of titans and tanks. It struggles with charges, which will instantly kill you if they touch it while you're on it, as they love to do. But you can kill them with their exposed rear end, which sadly doesn't act like much of a weak point. Jump off and destroy the leg armor, or have someone do it for you and you will melt them. The surprising thing is that you also melt hulks. The head is a small weak point, which only needs a few rounds to land to kill it, or you can hit them in the back. It has a 180 second cooldown, reduced by ship modules, and will last about 1/3 of that time if you spray. The kicker is that unlike sentries, dropping a new one doesn't get rid of the last one. The trick is not to be the center of attention. Place it in the distance or in anticipation of an attack and you will shred them. It's got the power, it's got the cool factor. This is the only weapon that gets Super F's finest on its own merits. I hope they never change this thing. The shield generator relay is naturally the disappointing follow-up to such a godly weapon. It blocks projectiles coming in while allowing you to shoot out, and with a 90-second cooldown, it seems pretty good, right? Well, aside from enemies walking in and forcing you out, it just never sees much utility. Against bugs, it's pointless, and against automatons, it just seems ineffective. If you're struggling with bots and need a stratagem to help, you're better off getting the EMS mortar. I've just never been able to get any utility out of it. It goes in E, for everything just walks in.
Damn, boy!
And finally, the Tesla Tower is kinda similar. It always gets destroyed before I can see much use from it. Or it just repeatedly kills me despite the fact I'm standing 12 nautical miles away. I can see it has potential. On bug missions, only Chargers and Titans really pose a threat, and the smaller bugs get melted by it. But I've never had it last long enough to see how good it really is. It has a 150 second cooldown, and I'm pretty sure it's killed me more times than it's killed enemies. Even going prone doesn't save me. I would put it on C because I see potential, but I'm gonna put it in D. Even if you were to use it just right, it's just so impractical. There are better options. Alright, I have 20 hours to finish this, and I'm only just starting now, so this is gonna be a bit faster. The AR-23 Liberator is the stock assault rifle. It holds up alright in the late game. The main problem with it is that you have to mag dump to kill medium enemies, so you'll either be running out of ammo constantly, or have to use a lot of crowd control stratagems. It gets a C. The AR-23P Liberator Penetrator is basically the same, with extra armor penetration. What this means, I have no idea, because it feels identical to the stock. It's burst fire, but if you spam click, it essentially fires at the same rate. B tier. The AR-23E Liberator Explosive is the explosive round variant. I really don't like it. In the current state of the game, explosive damage has a modifier for weak spots, but this gun just feels like it does no damage. It doesn't have a real explosive area like the Plaz 1, and it doesn't do the damage that the JAR 5 Dominator has. F tier. Probably my least favourite gun. The R63 Diligence and the R63CS Diligence Counter-Sniper are high-accuracy, semi-auto rifle that ought to do more weak point damage, or penetration. They're much heavier than other guns, and I find myself constantly unable to keep the gun on my cursor.
This thing's so slow to aim, what the hell?
Especially the Counter-Sniper. I feel like they're just worse Liberator penetrators. I find myself constantly switching to my sidearm when using these. F. The SMG-37 Defender feels a bit like the stock rifle, but with a slower rate of fire that makes it feel more powerful and accurate. It's weird. I almost prefer this to the stock rifle because of how much more consistent it is. B tier. The SG-8 Punisher is the first shotgun. It's not bad, it has a slow rate of fire, not a huge spread, but it does have decent knockback, which is good for bugs, but in my opinion bad for bots because it's harder to headshot them. Reloading shells individually is nice, but with all the shotguns we're basically just avoiding the elephant in the room. The Breaker has more ammo, more DPS, more mags supplied from the resupply pod, faster overall reload. All the shotguns are completely outdone by it. The SG-8 gets a C. The SG-8S Slugger is the same gun but it shoots slugs. And it's blue. Kinda rate it, but it suffers with the same problems. It does have a mega knockback effect, and feels great. I'd go so far as to say it feels better than the stock Punisher, but it might just be that chunky fire. B tier. The SG-225 Breaker is the meta gun. It has an average spread, is semi-automatic, and a magazine size of 16. It's the highest DPS primary by quite a margin. I have to put it in S tier for how good it is, but it ruins 90% of all of the primary options simply by existing. Like the railgun, the other guns need a buff, because even the Breaker struggles sometimes. It feels like every enemy is a bullet sponge, taking entire magazines to kill. If they do nerf it, they should nerf the enemy health, or make weak points do more damage. The SG-225SP Breaker Spray and Pray is the same gun, but with more ammo per mag, and way less damage. Like, tickling the enemies kind of damage. Like the regular Breaker, it takes almost a full mag on an exposed charger leg to kill it, but because the mag is twice as big, it essentially takes twice as long. F tier. The SG-225IE Breaker Incendiary is the same gun, but also sets things on fire, making for a wonderful fireworks display. Even though you're still tickling your enemies, those tickles set them on fire, which can be devastating for large groups of enemies. You can even do it across the map. It's useless against bots though. E tier. The JAR 5 Dominator is what the Liberator explosive should have been. In fact, I say ignore it entirely and use this instead. It still doesn't have an explosive area of effect like the Plaz, but it does do enough damage to compensate. If you're accurate, this thing can be really effective against both bots and bugs. B tier. The LAZ-5 Scythe is a continuous beam energy weapon, and it barely does any damage. It has infinite ammo if you don't overheat it, and 6 reloads if you do. F tier. The Plaz 1 Scorcher, on the other hand, shoots a plasma bolt that explodes on impact with a real area of effect, meaning you don't have to be 100% accurate. It's the only weapon that contends with the Breaker. It doesn't feel overpowered, it feels like it does just the right amount of damage. It does burn through ammo, so you really need to make sure you're hitting the weak spots. It kills exposed charges in about half a mag. The main downside is that it's terrible against large groups or light enemies. Each light enemy is basically a waste to shoot at. It does however open up alternative support weapon loadouts, especially against bots. The Plaz 1 can kill every automaton, including tanks and turrets if you shoot at the vents, so you can omit your anti-tank in favour of something capable of killing large groups, like a grenade launcher or more eagle strikes, to make up for its weaknesses. It's almost like a mini support weapon in and of itself. It goes in S tier. The P2 Peacemaker is the stock pistol, and being one of only 3 options, it does really well, even on higher difficulties. It's a 1 to 2 shot to kill lights, which is what you'll be using it for anyway. It can fire as fast as you can pull the trigger, and reloads quick, making for a great panic button when you need to reload or get surrounded. It is, however, completely outclassed by the next unlock, but it's fun to go back to every now and then. They really nailed the feel of this gun. It feels great. A tier. The P19 Redeemer is a machine pistol that surpasses some of the primary weapons in terms of DPS and versatility. It burns through ammo though, but as a result, it melts enemies. You can tap fire or spray to rid yourself of light enemies, and makes for the ultimate get out of jail free card when surrounded by hunters. Like the Breaker, the only real downside is that it completely outclasses the other pistols. It still goes in S tier. The P4 Senator is a revolver that feels amazing to use. It is, in practice however, not very effective. The main feature of this gun is that it can shoot through medium armor, like the Hive Guards, but with 6 shots, you're sacrificing your most ammo efficient way to deal with light enemies, meaning you'll constantly burn through your primary ammo. D tier. The G6 Frag is a short fuse grenade that doesn't give any benefit over the stock grenade. If you want a short fuse, just cook your grenades by holding the grenade button. F tier. The G12 High Explosive is the stock grenade, and it does fine. It has a 3.5 second fuse and decent damage, though it doesn't one-shot medium enemies. For this reason, it's pretty spammy and never really feels like it does too much. C tier. The G10 Incendiary Grenade sacrifices most of its explosive damage for laying down a carpet of fire. I feel like you get more utility out of this, since you can still destroy hives, but also deny areas, blanket choke points, or cover bug breaches. With them equipped, I find myself using my grenades more often in general. B tier. The G16 Impact is really nice if you like instant grenades. You don't have to think about the fuse, though it does a little less damage. You also have to be more considerate when throwing grenades into factories and hives, especially hives, as an enemy coming out can instant kill you. You kidding? It's just preference really. C tier. The G3 Smoke sounds good in practice, use it to break line of sight to lose enemies easier, but in reality, it just doesn't work, and I never find the automaton accuracy penalty to be very noticeable. F tier. There is also the Knight, which is a premium weapon you can only get from having the deluxe edition. It's insanely high rate of fire, so you can barely control the damn thing. You can put it on burst fire, but overall, I think the gun is just okay. C tier. Alright, 13 hours to go. I'm sure I can make the video even longer, right? So we all know about the meta build. The Breaker, Shield Pack, Railgun, and 500 kg. Hopefully the inevitable rebalance that will come out within a week of this video will open up more options, but for now, I have a few alternatives that work. The Grenade Launcher Spam Kit is one of the best feeling and effective alternatives to the meta. With the supply pack self-reload and how quick supply pods cooldown, you can decimate large waves of enemies. It's most effective against bugs, but it doesn't do too bad against bots. Plus, you can just act as a backline support for your team and resupply them on the go. Just be careful not to team kill them. You will have to concede your remaining 2 stratagem slots to the meta for anti-armor. This means taking things like the 500kg and rail cannon, since nothing else is as capable of reliable anti-tank, unless you can get teammates to dedicate themselves to that role. The Plas 1 Scorcher opens up some avenues since it fills the anti-tank role, mainly for bugs, but to a lesser degree for bugs. But it can't kill titans or chargers on its own. You can make up for this with an autocannon sentry if you place it right, or with any anti-tank support weapon like the expendable or recoilless. You can also spec entirely into anti-tank by taking the spear or rail cannon strike and expendable, which allows you to take on all armor in bots and bugs. It does leave you vulnerable to large amounts of enemies though, so this is best used in a team. Stealth is an option many people miss, rather ironically. By using the scout armor, you can easily slip by enemies. You'd be surprised just how close you can get while prone. To accentuate this, any kind of long-range weapons become more viable, especially since bug breaches and bot drops can become endless if you get stuck in a firefight. You're essentially opting to avoid fights, rather than kill everything. For all my testing, I can't complete all objectives and stay stealthed, so the strategy is more about doing as much as you can before detection, then losing detection as soon as possible. High speed, high destruction. Stratagems like the 500kg bomb or autocannon for destructible objectives, smoke for breaking line of sight, and sentries to distract enemies away from objectives and for retreating are your bread and butter. It's essentially an alternative playstyle to the run and railgun. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to remain stealthed for as long as possible. You can just use the stealth mechanics to change how you play. You can also try the sniper stealth combo, where one person snipes and the other sneaks into the objectives. Unfortunately, it rarely works. The best thing you can do is snipe as many as possible, draw them out, then have the infiltrator finish off the last ones, or use every destructive stratagem they have to get in, complete the objective, then get the fuck out of there. The name of the game is to not get tied down, because stealth as a complete concept doesn't really work in this game. I mean, we're dropping at hypersonic speeds in drop pods, probably made of tungsten. What about that screams stealth? If you have any more loadout ideas, put them in the comments below, because I could probably come up with some more, but I am running out of time.
These just have way... Oh,